main event starts.
All right, black and white sports supporters. Well, we're going to talk about Caitlin Clark and more specifically most of the year, but this is ridiculous. All right, none of this is fake. We didn't make up.
Myself for a second. Diana has been so complimentary of Caitlin since, which to me to the Twitter trolls and bots taking over. And what started there was this narrative.
Player that's the hybrid love child of Steph Curry and Larry Bird with the branding of Jordan, until you realize that that's very unpleasing to the eye kind of product real fast. I mean, honestly.
Right out of the gate, the accusation is that Sue Bird is gaslighting fans about the narrative around Caitlin Clark's reception in the league. That's a strong opening claim, and it deserves to be tested directly against what she actually said, not just against the general vibe of her podcast appearance. Because gaslighting is a specific accusation of intentional deception, and it's worth checking whether that's really what happened here.
You're tuning into Black and White Sports on YouTube. The no-holds-barred truth on sports. The main event starts.
All right, black and white sports supporters. Well, we're going to talk about Caitlin Clark and more specifically Diana Taurasi and Sue Bird, because Sue Bird has come out and, for lack of a better way of putting it, she's gaslighting fans, plain and simple. She's blowing smoke straight up your keister about the narrative.
The read that Diana Taurasi's reality is coming comment kicked off a lot of this dynamic is a fair, documented starting point. That quote genuinely did take on a life of its own, online well beyond what Taurasi originally said, which wasn't even specifically about Clark, according to Bird's own account of the Scott Van Pelt interview. Tracing the discourse back to its actual origin point is exactly the kind of context that should shape how seriously to take everything that followed.
Surrounding Caitlin Clark. Now, I will say this. I do think Diana Taurasi, she's largely responsible for a lot of this hate I think that Caitlin Clark is getting because she got the ball rolling. Remember Reality Check? And then, of course, Caitlin Clark promptly reality checked Diana Taurasi's dinosaur ass back into the previous century. Or would it be, I don't know, a billion years ago? Wherever you came from, Diana Taurasi, you're gone.
The framing that Bird's podcast comments amount to covering for her homegirl is a sharper, more personal read than the facts alone support. Bird and Taurasi have a long professional and personal history together, sure, but defending a friend's comments isn't automatically dishonest. It's just what friends do. That distinction matters before jumping straight to accusing her of deliberate deception.
Now, I guess, point being, Sue Bird sounds like she's trying to cover for her homegirl, and on her podcast, along with the cringe is coming, Megan Rapinoe, she makes these comments. And I guess she thinks that fans, sports fans, look, Sue Bird, let me tell you one thing about the new fans that came in, all right? They weren't WNBA fans. We were fans.
Now, the actual physical incidents referenced here are real and well documented. Angel Reese's foul on Clark, and Kennedy Carter's hard off-ball foul that the league later upgraded to a flagrant after review. What's not confirmed is the specific slur some lip readers claim to see Carter say afterward, that traces back to unverified lip-reading speculation from a single newspaper column, not anything the league or Carter has confirmed, so it deserves to be treated with real caution rather than repeated as settled fact.
Well, look, she's been very fair about Caitlin Clark most of the year, but this is ridiculous. All right, none of this is fake. We didn't make up, Angel Reese clotheslining Caitlin Clark or Kennedy Carter with the forearm shiver, WWE style. By the way, calling Caitlin Clark a bitch while doing it. And, Diamond DeShields coming across the middle and hitting Caitlin Clark Rod Woodson style like this is 1997.
The broader point about physical play crossing a line the league hasn't fully addressed is worth taking seriously on its own, separate from any one specific incident. Calling legitimately hard, borderline fouls punishment basketball, without acknowledging when they cross into flagrant territory, is a fair critique of how some of this gets framed publicly, regardless of where you land on any single play.
We didn't make any of that up. That's not in our heads, right? Or the Seattle Storm player that shaded her so bad in games. And I'm sorry, but if you guys keep calling that punishment basketball plays, then your league doesn't know basketball. All right? There's physical, and then there's whatever in the hell that is. It looks a lot like assault to a lot of different people. Let's listen.
Here's where it's worth actually hearing Bird's real explanation in full. She said this all traces back to a Scott Van Pelt interview where Taurasi got a general question about rookies, and Bird's honest point was that whether Taurasi was even talking about Clark specifically is something you'd have to ask her directly. That's a genuinely more nuanced starting point than Sue Bird is denying reality, and it deserves to be represented accurately.
Listen.
It started. In some ways, it started with me and Diana in our show getting interviewed by Scott Van Pelt, and Diana having, her response, which if you go back and watch it, and I don't mean to split hairs here, but it is just another moment where things get taken onto social media and they just grow and people spew and it turns into something that you can't even recognize within 24 hours. Scott Van Pelt did ask Diana a question about rookies. Now, was Dee talking about Caitlin?
And her actual comparison to men's sports, using Draymond Green and Dylan Brooks as examples of players who've had real conflicts with opponents, without the entire league being painted as hating one specific guy, is a legitimate, thoughtful point about a real double standard in how these storylines get framed by gender. That's worth engaging with directly, rather than dismissing outright, even if you ultimately disagree with how far the comparison extends.
Or not, you have to ask her. If I can get ahead of myself for a second, Diana has been so complimentary of Caitlin since, which to me just really speaks to the issue, which is at times people have been negative towards some of these rookies, right? From a basketball standpoint. They have been critical from a basketball standpoint. And yet those statements have been just blanket statements on how an entire group of people feel. That is what is really, really troubling for me. What you see in men's sports at times, and I'll use examples like Dylan Brooks and Draymond Green, and it's not to call them out in any specific way other than they've had moments with players. And yet when they do something, it's not the entire league hates the player that they happen to have a thing with. All right.
Bird's actual quote about Twitter trolls and bots amplifying a petty jealous player's narrative after Taurasi's comments went viral is a real specific claim about how online discourse escalates, and it's a genuinely fair mechanism to point to, even if you think it doesn't explain every documented on-court incident that followed. Online amplification and real physical conduct on the floor aren't mutually exclusive explanations. Both things can be true at once.
So I just want to start with that. So where I've 100% landed is that once Diana's comments went viral, it led to the Twitter trolls and bots taking over. And what started there was this narrative of petty, jealous players hating on Caitlin. That's really what happened. That's where it started, that we must just dislike her, that we look at her side-eyed, that we don't want her to come in the WNBA and be successful, that we're hating on her, right?
We didn't cause that narrative. And she's trying, I'm going to tell you, she's trying to blame fans too here. And no.
The pushback that the 1BA needs to actually protect its biggest commercial asset, and that Adam Silver getting involved could help legitimize the league, is a completely fair business argument regardless of how you feel about Bird's specific comments. Comparing Clark's crossover appeal to a Steph Curry-Larry Bird hybrid with Jordan's branding is hyperbolic, sure, but the underlying point about protecting your biggest draw is basic sports business logic.
It's on your players to act responsible and act professional on a basketball court. And look, the one thing I'll give about the new fan base that came in, they will check every one of their hating asses every single time something happens. It's called trying to make you take responsibility for your actions, or at least trying to make the WNBA take responsibility for their players' actions, and their own commissioner doesn't have the guts to do it. I've said, when is Adam Silver going to get involved? Because there's an opportunity here for this league to actually make a lot of money and become legit. And until they open their eyes and realize the one player that's the hybrid love child of Steph Curry.
And the direct rebuttal here is fair too. You genuinely can't equate isolated conflicts like Draymond Green's with a documented pattern of specific incidents across multiple games and multiple opponents involving one particular player. That's a real distinction worth making. A single flashpoint rivalry reads very differently than a season-long pattern, and it's fair to push back on any comparison that flattens that difference.
So, here we go. Like Sue Bird, but she is not being 100% factual. Exactly. The Diamond to Shields play, the Kennedy Carter play, and that poke in the eye, I didn't even bring up Dejanay Carrington, were not basketball plays that everyone has dealt with. That is a fact. And you can't bring up Draymond Green because Draymond's not going around targeting one particular player. This isn't a good take on the reality of the situation. I don't understand why the WNBA community favors to gaslight the basketball community like we don't see Caitlin Clark being targeted. Saying it's all in your head with a soft voice doesn't make it a better cover-up, Sue Bird.
The take that the WNBA doesn't have enough overall talent depth to sustain this level of physical play without it reading as excessive is a real, if blunt, basketball opinion. And it's genuinely debatable rather than settled either way. Plenty of analysts would push back hard on that specific framing, but it's a legitimate structural argument about roster depth and spacing, not just an insult.
Literally spot on. The NBA figured it out 35 years ago, but we're supposed to accept more dirty violence in women's ball than men? None of it makes sense. And nobody wants to see that. That's the other thing. It becomes a very unpleasing to the eye kind of product real fast. I mean, honestly, more gaslighting when will it end? I mean, this guy says, look, Bird's not going to call out these players that she knows in the WNBA. Yeah, but until somebody does, then you're just part of the problem. Women's sports has too many activists and not enough normal competitors who make the game fun other than Caitlin Clark.
And the closing frustration that new fans who came in through Clark's rise are being talked down to as if they lack basketball IQ is worth sitting with as a real, ongoing tension in how this fan expansion has been received by longtime followers of the league. Whether or not you agree with every specific claim in this video, that broader dynamic between new and existing fan bases is a real, documented friction point in WNBA media coverage right now.
Run out on the court and give Caitlin Clark a damn clothesline. I didn't give her a Stan Hansen, a Barry Windham from 1987. Adam Page. I didn't do that. That wasn't my flying lariat in the Chicago Sky game. I don't get it. It's crazy. Even worse, they got new fans in, and they're treating the new fans like they're stupid and don't have a basketball IQ. I don't want to hear that shit. I've been watching basketball since I was 6. I'm 50 years old nearly. I mean, God, I came up through the bad boy Pistons.